In the heart of London, Ethan Mercer, a ruthless billionaire CEO, rules his tech empire with an iron fist, dismissing his receptionist Tanya as beneath him. But a shocking secret unravels everything. Tanya is his long-lost half-sister, hidden by their father's shame. As Ethan grapples with guilt and Tanya rises to power, their fractured bond becomes a battleground of redemption and rage. Proof that racism runs deep, but change might still be possible. Welcome to the unseen line. The glass tower of Mercer Enterprises loomed over London's financial district, its sleek lines cutting through the gray November sky. Ethan Mercer stood at the top, 52 years old, a billionaire CEO whose name was synonymous with power and ruthlessness. His dark hair was streaked with silver, his blue eyes cold as steel, and his tailored suits cost more than most people's yearly rent. He'd built his tech empire from a modest inheritance, turning it into a global giant through sheer will and a willingness to crush anyone in his path. Downstairs, at the polished marble reception desk, Tanya Williams sorted mail with quiet precision. At 29, she was a stark contrast to Ethan, petite, with deep brown skin and a calm demeanor that masked a core of steel. She'd worked the front desk for 3 years, enduring Ethan's dismissive glances and sharp commands without flinching. To him, she was just the receptionist, another cog in his machine, unworthy of notice beyond her ability to answer phones and smile at clients. "Girl, get me coffee," Ethan snapped one morning, striding past her desk without a glance. His voice carried the casual arrogance of a man who'd never been challenged. Tanya's jaw tightened, but she rose, fetched the coffee, and placed it on his desk upstairs without a word. Ethan didn't thank her, never did. She returned to her post, her expression unreadable, though her hands trembled slightly as she resumed her work. The staff whispered about Ethan's cruelty, his firings over minor errors, his disdain for anyone below his pay grade. But Tanya bore the brunt silently, her resilience a shield against his barbs. She needed the job. London wasn't cheap, and her mother's medical bills weren't getting smaller. So she stayed, swallowing his insults, biding her time. The truth came crashing down on a rainy Tuesday. Ethan was in his office, barking orders at a VP over the phone, when his assistant Claire knocked timidly. "Sir, there's a lawyer here. Says it's urgent." "Send him in," Ethan grunted, hanging up. He expected a merger dispute or a lawsuit, routine annoyances he'd squash with money or intimidation. The lawyer was an older man, balding, with a briefcase clutched tight. "Mr. Mercer, I'm David Hargrove. I represent the estate of your late father, Richard Mercer." Ethan frowned. "My father's been dead for years. What's this about?" Hargrove set a folder on the desk, his hands steady. "Before he passed, Richard left instructions to delay this until certain conditions were met. One of his children, you, reached a specific milestone. Your company's valuation hit $10 billion last quarter." "Get to the point," Ethan snapped. Hargrove opened the folder, revealing a yellowed birth certificate and a handwritten letter. "Your father had another child, a daughter, born out of wedlock in 1995 to a woman named Grace Williams. Her name's Tanya." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Tanya? As in Tanya Williams," Hargrove confirmed. "Your receptionist. She's your half-sister." The room spun. Ethan gripped the desk, his mind racing back to his father, a cold, distant man who'd preached discipline and legacy. He'd never mentioned another child, never hinted at a secret family. But the documents were clear. DNA tests ordered by Richard years ago, a trust fund hidden away, a confession scrawled in his shaky hand. "I abandoned her. I was ashamed of her mother, of my weakness. Protect her, Ethan, when the time comes. Ethan stared out the window, the city blurred by rain. Tanya, quiet, unassuming Tanya, was his blood. And he'd treated her like dirt. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He sat in his penthouse overlooking the Thames, a whiskey in hand, replaying every interaction with Tanya. The snide remarks, the barked orders, the way he'd looked through her. He'd always prided himself on his control, his superiority, white, wealthy, untouchable. Now, the mirror showed a man undone by his own ignorance. The next morning, he called her to his office. Tanya entered, her posture stiff, expecting another petty demand. Ethan stood, unusually hesitant. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair. She did, her eyes wary. "I got news yesterday," he began, voice rough. "About my father, our father. You're his daughter, my sister." Tanya froze, her breath catching. "What?" He slid the folder across the desk. She read it in silence. Birth certificate, letter, DNA results. Her hands trembling as the truth sank in. When she looked up, her eyes were hard. "You're telling me Richard Mercer was my father?" she said, voice low. "The man who left my mom to raise me alone, scraping by in Brixton while he lived like a king." Ethan nodded, throat tight. "I didn't know. He never told me. And you," she continued, standing. "You've treated me like nothing for years. Because I'm black? Because I'm just a receptionist? Now you want to play family?" "I was wrong," Ethan said, the words foreign on his tongue. "I've been an ass. Worse. I can't change that. But I can fix this. You're not staying at that desk. You're a Mercer. You belong here with me." Tanya laughed, sharp and bitter. "You don't get to decide that. I've survived you, Ethan. I don't need your pity." "It's not pity," he insisted. "It's what's right." She stared at him, then walked out, leaving the folder behind. For weeks, Tanya wrestled with it. She'd always known her father was a ghost, a rich man who'd abandoned her mother after a fleeting affair. But Ethan, the brother she'd never had, the boss she'd despised, it was too much. Yet the trust fund, millions sitting untouched, offered a way out, a chance to escape the grind, to build something of her own. She returned to Ethan's office one gray afternoon, her decision made. "I'll stay," she said, "but not as your charity case. Train me. Give me a real role. I'll earn it." Ethan nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. Done. He put her in operations, starting small, logistics, client relations. Tanya was a natural, sharp, diligent, unafraid to challenge the old guard. Ethan watched, stunned, as she mastered systems he'd taken years to learn. His staff grumbled, some quit, but Tanya held her ground, her quiet strength reshaping the floor. Ethan, meanwhile, unraveled. Guilt gnawed at him. Over Tanya, over the father he'd idolized, over the privilege he'd wielded like a weapon. He started small, coffee runs for her, awkward apologies. She brushed them off, but he persisted, peeling back his arrogance layer by layer. A year later, Mercer Enterprises buzzed with change. Tanya stood in a boardroom, presenting a new diversity initiative to a room of suits. Her initiative, her voice commanding the space. She'd risen to COO, second only to Ethan, her name on the letterhead beside his. The staff who'd once ignored her now deferred to her. though some still whispered about favoritism. Ethan sat at the head of the table, watching her with something like pride. Their relationship had shifted. Tentative lunches, late-night talks about their father, shared silences that spoke louder than words. He'd apologized, truly, tearfully, one night over whiskey, and she'd listened, her forgiveness a fragile thread. After the meeting, they stood by the window, London sprawling below. "You're better at this than I ever was," Ethan said, half smiling. "Don't get soft on me," Tanya replied, but her tone was warm. "We've got work to do." He nodded. "Together?" "Together," she agreed, a faint smile breaking through. The story didn't end there. Racism still lingered, in boardroom glances, in Ethan's old habits, in the world beyond the tower. Tanya thrived, but she wondered, could Ethan truly change, or would his past resurface? Ethan, haunted by his father's sins and his own, kept trying, mentoring her, stepping back, learning to listen. Their bond grew, a bridge forged from resentment to kinship, but it wasn't perfect. As they stood there, the city lights flickering, the future stretched wide, hopeful, uncertain. Redemption was possible, but not promised, and that perhaps was the point.